Hello everyone! In this lesson, we will learn how to reduce duplicate code in our project. In particular, we are going to be focusing on our page banner area. At the moment, I'm viewing a professor details screen, and in our previous lesson, we wrote code so that each professor can have its own unique background photo, as well as subtitle text. Right now, let's go take a look at that code that we wrote to power the page banner. So in our theme folder, jump into singleprofessor.php. And here's the page banner code that displays the dynamic background image and subtitle text. So this takes care of the page banner for the professor post type, but what about all of our other post types, right? Like events and programs and single blog posts and traditional pages. Now our first instinct might be to copy and paste and duplicate this code into those other 4 or 5 template files, but that's probably not the best idea. Because then if in the future we ever need to make a change to any of this code, we would have to edit 5 or 6 files instead of just one single file. So in order to avoid duplicating this code into 5 different files, let me show you what we can do. Right now, let's go ahead and highlight this div that has a class of page banner. So this entire chunk of code, and let's copy it into our clipboard. And then let's jump into our functions.php file. So up at the very top here, we can create a reusable, recyclable function. So function, and we could name it whatever we want. Just to make sense, I'm going to name it page banner, parentheses, curly brackets. And inside the body of the function, let's begin with a comment. So // and let's say PHP logic will live here. Okay, and we can replace this with real code a bit later on in the lesson. But for now, remember that our clipboard is full of HTML, not PHP. So maybe down on a new line, let's drop out of PHP. And then right before this closing curly bracket that ends the function, we can go back into PHP. So now in between those two lines right here, we are free to paste in our clipboard. Let's go ahead and save that. Okay, so now that we've created a function named page banner with the relevant code, back in our single professor template file, we can go ahead and delete that div with a class of page banner. And instead, right in its place, let's call the page banner function. So up on this line, we're still in PHP, so maybe just drop down to a new line. And let's just say page banner, parentheses, to call the function. Let's go ahead and save that. And we see that the dynamic page banner on the front end is still working perfectly. Okay, so that takes care of professors. What about a traditional page? So if I click About Us up in the header, what if we edit the About Us page to use a custom background image and a custom subtitle? So on the About Us page, let's use this Edit Page link up in the menu bar. And let's go ahead and give the About Us page a subtitle. Let's say, we are a great school that has been around for a long time. And let's also go ahead and upload a custom background image for the page banner. So add image. Let's upload a file. I will use this photo of a building. Select image down in the bottom right. Okay, let's go ahead and update or save this. And then let's use the permalink to go back to the front end. Okay, and now we need to update the page.php template to actually use that dynamic data. So in our text editor, let's jump into page.php. Here we can see that page banner content. And now instead of trying to update this code to make it dynamic, let's just delete it entirely. So delete the page banner div. And instead, in its place, let's call our page banner function. So up here, while we are still in PHP, new line, and let's just say page banner, call the function. Let's save that. Cool, and now our generic page template supports our page banner. Now next, let's work on making our function resilient and flexible. Resilient in the sense that if I go to a page that doesn't have a custom uploaded background image like our history, Instead of a blank black background here, we should instead see the default ocean or beach fallback photo. that we were using before. And let's also make our function flexible. For an example of what I mean in terms of flexibility, if we go to the All Events Archive screen, the title and subtitle on this screen are not being pulled in from the WordPress database. Instead, this is just custom text that we typed out in the template for this screen. So for example, in our text editor, if we go to archive-event.php, since this is an archive screen or a post collection screen, we don't want to pull in the title and subtitle for a specific post that lives in the database, right? So instead we just type out that text right in the template. So when I say I want our function to be flexible, if I close this and jump back into our page.php, when we call this page banner function, it would be nice if within the parentheses we could pass it different arguments to control the title, subtitle, and background photo. Well, we can do exactly that. So check this out. Within the parentheses, when we call our function, let's create an array, so the word array and then its own set of parentheses. And then in between those array parentheses, let's drop down to a new line to stay organized. And now we can create an associative array just like we've been doing throughout the course. Except this time we are the creators of the function, which means we get to make up the names of the parameters. Just as an example, let's say that title equals hello there, this is the title. This parameter name could be anything. It doesn't have to be title. It could be pizza or unicorn. It can be anything we choose because we are the ones that are going to need to be on the lookout for this name in our function that lives in functions.php. Before we update our function to be on the lookout for this incoming array of arguments, let's add a comma at the end of this line, and let's also create a parameter named subtitle and set it to equal hi, this is the subtitle. Right? These are just quick test values. At this point, let's go ahead and save our progress, and then let's jump into functions.php, and let's make our page banner function be on the lookout for that incoming array of arguments. So to achieve that, within our functions parentheses, we can just create a parameter. So begin with a $, and then you can make up whatever name you want. Args is a very common name to use here, short for arguments. But you could also call this data or unicorn or pizza or magic. Name doesn't matter. I'm going to go with args because that's just sort of an industry standard in WordPress. But the idea here is that now within the body of our function, we can dig into this args array and use whatever info we want. So for example, let's use the title. Within this main h1, instead of outputting the WordPress title from the database, let's output the title argument that's getting passed into the function, right? So back in page.php, when we call the function, remember we've got an array and then we set the title to hello, this is the title. So check this out. Back in our functions.php, let's hollow out the h1 and let's drop into PHP and let's echo out, and let's begin by looking inside our args array. Right? We have access to this because we've passed it into the signature of the function. So down here, look inside the args array. So look inside an array, it's just square brackets. And then it's just quotes and the name of the parameter that you're looking for. So in our case, title. So now if I go ahead and save this, and then jump back to the About Us page, cool, here we see the title that we passed into the function as an argument. But what happens if we call the function and do not provide a title argument? So back in our page.php, what if we delete this title line? So we just don't provide any sort of title. So this is obviously not what we want. So this is where the topic of intelligent defaults comes into play. If a title argument is not provided, we don't want it to default to nothing. Instead, why don't we default or fall back on the title of the current page or post? So let me show you how to set up a fallback or default value. Let's jump into functions.php, and remember up here where we have this comment, PHP logic will live here. Let's delete that line, but in its place, let's create an if statement. So if parentheses, curly brackets. And for our condition check in these parentheses, let's say only if a title was not provided. So first, let's just try to pull up the title property. So we would look inside our args array, and then to look inside it, it's square brackets, quotes, title. So if a title gets passed, this is how we access it. And as long as the title exists or is not completely empty, this will evaluate to true. But if we want to check for the opposite of that, we can just begin this with an exclamation. So we're saying only if this function got called and a title was not passed into it, only if that is the case, then let's just set the title to the WordPress title field for that post or page, right? So in WordPress, we know that you can get the current title for a page or post by running a function named getTheTitle. Okay, now right before this, at the beginning of this line, let's just set our args array and look inside it for the title property, and then set that to equal getTheTitle. So this way, down in the actual template part of our code, we don't have to mix in any logic. We can just always output our args title property, and we can handle all of the logic decision making up in this portion of the code. Okay, so we've set up a fallback. If no title is provided, just pull in the WordPress post page title. Let's save that. And now if we jump back, cool, we see About Us on the About Us page. But if we go into page.php and add title back in, we see that custom argument value. Cool. Now let's set up similar fallback or default behavior for the subtitle and the background photo. Let's begin with the subtitle. So back in functions.php, right below this if statement, let's just create a new if statement. So if parentheses curly brackets. For the condition check, let's see if the args subtitle exists. And to check for the opposite of that, just begin with an exclamation. So if no subtitle argument is passed into the function, then let's just set the args subtitle to equal the WordPress custom field subtitle value for the current post or page, right? The value that lives in the database. So to access that, let's call a function named getField. Let's end this line with a semicolon, but in the parentheses for getField, we just include the name of the advanced custom field that we're interested in, which in this case, if you can't remember, it was page_banner_subtitle. Okay, so this will take care of the logic or decision making, and then down here in the template part of our function, when it comes time to actually output the subtitle, let's delete this the field code. So now we just have an empty PHP area, and instead let's just echo out our args subtitle value. Okay, so if we save that and check out the front end, cool, we see the subtitle that we passed into the function as an argument, but if we delete that really quick, so in page PHP, if we remove that subtitle, perfect. We see that our function defaults to the custom field subtitle for the current post or page. Now, changing gears a bit, let's work on the fallback behavior for the background photo. So back in page.php, when we are calling the function, within this array, instead of title or subtitle, you could imagine that maybe we would pass along something named photo and set that to equal a URL that points towards a JPEG. So for example, let me paste in my clipboard. If you want to follow along with this example, you can pause the lesson and go onto the internet or Google and just find an absolute URL to any JPEG or image that you want to test out. Right? So in my example, the URL that I just used looks out onto the internet to pull in this JPEG. So back in our code, let's adjust our function to actually work with this URL that we pass it. So let's save this, and back in functions.php, right below our second if statement, let's just create another if statement for the photo. So if parentheses curly brackets. And for the condition, let's say only if a photo argument was not passed along. So to find that argument, we can look inside our args array for photo, and to check for the opposite of that, exclamation. So if no photo argument is passed along, what do we want to do? Well, let's check to see if an advanced custom field image was uploaded for the current post or page. So we will use another if statement. And for the condition, we want to check to see if an image was uploaded into the custom field. So let's say get field, and the name of the advanced custom field where users can upload an image, if you forgot the name, it was page banner background image. And this will only evaluate to true if there's actually an image for the current post or page. So if that's the case, let's just go ahead and set our args photo to equal the perfectly cropped version of the image that was uploaded. So we'll say get field. The field name was page banner background image, but we don't want the original super high resolution copy. So right after that, let's look inside the array named sizes, and then right inside that array, we're interested in the image that is cropped to the page banner size. If this code is a bit fuzzy to you, you might remember that we already used this similar code down here to pull in a specific sized version of the image. Okay, but back to the task at hand, let's finish out this logic here, because we need one last level of insurance, or one last fallback. So what happens if someone does not pass along a photo argument and the current page or post doesn't have a page banner custom field photo? Well, to handle that, right after this inner nested if statement, right after the closing curly bracket for it, we can say else, and then a pair of curly brackets, and this is our last line of defense. So now let's just pull in that beach or ocean photograph that we've been using throughout the entire course. So if it comes to it, let's set the args photo to equal, and then I just want to point towards a file that lives in our theme folder. So let's call a function named getThemeFileURI, and this function will point towards our theme folder, and then we can just tack on a /images/ocean.jpg. Okay, now at this point, our logic and decision making for the photo is complete, but let's be sure to scroll down and update the actual template part of the code. So here is where we are actually using the URL that points towards an image. So right after background image URL, and then right inside this opening PHP block, let's just go ahead and delete everything that we see here inside the PHP block. So now we just have opening and closing PHP tags. And let's just echo out our args photo value. This is a bit difficult to read because it's dropping down onto the next line. But you can see args, and then I'm opening up square brackets, and then photo. Okay, so let's give that a save. Cool, so we see that the background photo is that image that lives out on the internet that we provided as an argument. Right, so back in page.php, remember we said photo equals this. Now if we go ahead and delete that, so if we don't provide a photo argument, it falls back to the advanced custom fields image upload for the current page or post. And finally, if we visit a page that does not have an image uploaded for that custom field, for example, if we click on to our history or our goals, perfect. We see the ocean or beach photo as our fallback. Now, in reality, when it comes to traditional pages like this, we don't actually want to hard code a custom title as the argument. So back in page.php, let's just not even provide an array of any arguments whatsoever. Let's just simply call page banner. Oops, we see a fatal error message here. I know what's wrong. So right now you can follow along with me. In our functions.php file, we've listed args as a necessary parameter. So if someone calls the function and doesn't provide it that, it's going to throw a tantrum. So what we can do instead, in our function signature, we can say args equals null. And that will basically make the argument optional instead of required. Because now, no matter what happens, args will always equal something, right? It will at least equal null. So let's go ahead and save that. That gets rid of the error message. Perfect. And that's actually going to bring this lesson to a close. In our next lesson, we will go through all of our templates and actually make use of our new page banner function. Let's keep things rolling, and I will see you then.